you for joining us. I'm Scott Ladingham. We are here in the unique Northwest with Courtney Flatt, EarthFix correspondent based in the very hot Tri-Cities. Thank you for joining us, Courtney.
Thanks for having me.
And the Tri-Cities, the oven of Washington, I think, this week. So we'll try not to make you melt into a flat puddle, Courtney Flatt. Oh my God, okay, sorry. So we are going to be talking today about a salmon researcher who was encountering some wolves in Okanogan County, and Courtney was on that story. Also about the reintroduction or possible reintroduction of grizzly bears in the North Cascades and what Washington State might be able to learn from Montana, and also lampreys and why Northwest Native tribes are cheering their return. Courtney has covered all those stories and more on her EarthFix beat. So if you have any questions on those topics or others on the environmental news front, go ahead and ask those in the comments section on Facebook, and we'll try to get to them now or after the live stream. So without any further ado, Courtney, the salmon researcher, the big saga of wolves that encountered that researcher and being saved by a helicopter. Tell us more.
Yeah, so it was a pretty dramatic story, but super rare. Wolves don't normally encounter people like this. She was surveying streams in Okanogan County and kind of just following the stream, and it took her to this super remote area, and she started kind of seeing signs of wolves. She saw some footprints. She heard some barking and yipping. And then these wolves from the loop pack appeared, and she couldn't scare them away. She tried really hard. She did everything right. We should say that for sure. She yelled really loud, waved her hands, sprayed bear spray, and they wouldn't go away. So she climbed up in a tree, waited for a while, came back down. The wolves came back, climbed back up in the tree, and used her satellite phone to call for help. And that's when the Department of Natural Resources were notified, and these helicopter pilots came, and they saw the wolves, and they kind of scared them away, and were able to save her and get her away from the site, which I'm sure must have been a really scary experience. But for a while, biologists weren't really sure what was happening, and they hiked out to the area where her GPS location was, and they discovered it's what's called a rendezvous site. And so it's like after the little wolf pups are weaned, they're taken to this site and kind of like monitored and watched until they're able to hunt with the adult pack. And so she just wandered to this area that was really close to the rendezvous site, about a kilometer away from the den site, and so the wolves were protecting their babies.
Okay, so as far as I understand, this area north of Winthrop, east of the Chiluk River, kind of in that valley, near the Pasayten Wilderness kind of region, east of the North Cascades National Park. So, but we don't know the exact location, right? However, are these wolves tracked or monitored by biologists? And so I guess the question is, how did they not know that these wolves were there in the area if they are monitored?
Yeah, and so they one wolf definitely did have a GPS collar on it. They were able to see that it had been in the location where she was at the night before. They haven't given the precise location at all, but we do know, like I said, it was about a kilometer away from a den site, and I think it was probably just kind of different agencies. She was working for the Forest Service. Department of Fish and Wildlife does a lot of monitoring of the wolves and where they're at. And so it's kind of something that actually has sparked a little bit of controversy. A lot of ranchers and a lot of people want to know a little bit more where the den sites are. The Okanogan County Sheriff has said that it would be really helpful so that they can warn people like this biologist or like hikers when there are wolves in the area, or if they need to kind of close the spot down. And I should say that she was in a really remote area. It wasn't near any hiking trails. It wasn't near any camping grounds. So they don't think that this is going to be a problem again. They don't think that this will happen again. And so they're not concerned about this pack and this area, but it was kind of a really rare, really random thing that happened. And fortunately, she's safe, and everyone involved was able to be safe and not have any really big problems happen.
Well, we always joke around here that every story somehow relates to either salmon, wolves, or dams. And hey, in this story, we got salmon and wolves together. So hey, we're marking them off our list. Okay, so moving along to another creepy, crawly, woolly story, bears in the North Cascades. Of course, there are bears, black bears, very few grizzly bears in the state of Washington. But there's an effort or a proposal to reintroduce grizzly bears in larger populations in the North Cascades. We've talked about that before. Secretary of the Interior Ryan Zinke was in the North Cascades, which you talked about a few months ago. And now we're looking toward Montana as kind of like a model or a way that they've dealt with reintroduction of grizzly bears in certain areas over the past decades. You covered that story. Tell us a little bit more about what we're kind of learning from the Montana example.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on in Montana that people say really could kind of shape and help inform what people are thinking could happen in the North Cascades. And so there's a certain area of northwest Montana called the Cabinet Mountains, and it happened to be a lot like the North Cascades in the 90s. Their grizzly bear population dipped to the single digits, which is where biologists think our population of grizzly bears are now in the North Cascades. And they were able to start trucking in grizzlies slowly from Canada. They bring in mostly females. They bring them in at a time where there's like lots of berries around so that they're not searching for other sources of food. And over the years, they've been able to bring the population up in the Cabinet Mountains, and it's could be used as a model, as the rest of Montana has been. For the North Cascades, people there just really kind of learning to live with grizzlies. And a lot of it's how you learn to live with black bears too. Don't leave your dog food out. Don't leave salt licks around. Don't leave your garbage sitting around, especially when bears are coming out of hibernation. And people use oftentimes on smaller properties electric fences, which are really good at keeping the bears away and out because it delivers a shock to the bears. They kind of lead with their nose and it shocks them, and they don't come back. And so there's a lot of that going on, but also there's still some tensions as the grizzlies are expanding their range there. I talked with a rancher who'd had his sheep herd attacked, and he lost about 13 sheep, and was very, very upset about the grizzlies expanding their range. So a lot of the things and a lot of the political things that we see happening in Washington are also happening in Montana.
We should note that this is not a foregone conclusion that this reintroduction is even going to happen yet in the North Cascades. Still a long ways off if it does indeed happen. But how long is it off? I mean, are we talking possibly a resolution in the next year, 10 years? Is it even, like, what's the timeline here?
Yeah, so they're thinking they'll have a decision on a draft proposal, what they want to do in the North Cascades by the end of this year. It's received support from Secretary Zinke, who grew up in Montana and has said he is in support of the great bear. He won't say yay or nay on this proposal, but he says, things are looking favorable. And there are varying proposals in the North Cascades as to what they would do, from doing nothing to bringing in grizzly bears slowly or more aggressively. But eventually they want to have about 200 bears, and they think it'll take about 100 years to get there. So it won't even be like within my lifetime, or maybe even the generation below me's lifetime, to where they can see grizzly bears often in the wild here.
All right, well, we will continue to watch that if it does happen. And keeping on our topic of creepies, crawlies, woolies, and now I guess swimmies, lamprey coming back to Northwest rivers in greater numbers, and Northwest tribes are big fans of that. First of all, maybe tell us, what are lampreys and why the heck are Northwest tribes so in favor of them?
Sure. So lamprey are fish, but they're eel-like fish, and they have these suckers. You can see one right there. Kind of sucks onto the bottom of the river, and they use their little sucker mouthies to jump kind of up waterfalls, and that's how they migrate up the rivers. Right now, well, I guess I should say, lamprey are a very important food source for Northwest tribes. They're considered a first food, and the tribes use them at dinners and feasts and funerals and weddings. But they've just kind of, their populations have just dwindled since the dams went in. And one of the only places they can harvest them now is at Willamette Falls, which is near Portland. And so for tribes like the Umatilla, that's a really long way to go to harvest something that used to be kind of in your backyard. And so about in the 70s was when they really started noticing that the lamprey were declining. And it was kind of common practice back then for managers to use pesticides to get rid of what they call trash fish, which lamprey were considered. And this was before people knew the ecological benefits of them and the importance to the tribes. And so in the 70s, they became functionally extinct. And in about the 90s, BPA started funding the tribes to move lamprey around the dams. And they've had like a lot of projects. It's kind of like a big experiment in the Columbia Basin is how it's been described to me. But now from like no fish in the Umatilla River, the tribes are now seeing 2,600 fish, and they think they'll get like 3,000 fish this year. And so that's not a harvestable population, but it's a really big step in the right direction.
All right, well, let's hope that they come back in greater numbers and that the tribes can have them in the numbers that they need. And I'm sure that you will continue to monitor that and report on it as they return. Okay, so the fish are in the rivers and they must be cool. Last question here. How are you going to stay cool there in the oven of Washington in the coming days? Where are you going swimming? What do you do? Are you going hiking up in the snow on Mount Hood?
No, it is really hot. I have been starting to sort of train for this triathlon that I've never done. So we've been swimming a lot in some of the local lap pools, and I haven't really swam since I was a kid, and so it's a lot harder than I remember. So just getting all that muscle memory back it's at least it is in the water and cool, but yeah.
Well, lucky for you, there's plenty of places, both pools and natural bodies of water in the Northwest to swim. There's 3 rivers that come together right there in the Tri-Cities, the Snake, Columbia, and the Yakima, right? So you have no excuse. All right, well, thanks so much for joining us today, Courtney.
Thank you.
If you want to check out more of her reporting on those or any other topics that Courtney covers for the Earth Fix Beat, find that at nwpb.org or join us every Tuesday at noon where we gather here on Facebook to discuss news of the unique Northwest.